Good morning, good day, and good evening. I'm, as always, your host, Brody Robertson, and today we are doing a very interesting episode. I have had a game developer on the show before, but usually it's to talk about the games they do, and we'll definitely get into that as well. But I want to focus more on a discussion of accessibility. Welcome to the show, Ritchie. How you doing?
I am doing awesome. I'm really happy to be on the show. I've been in the community for about a week or so now, and everybody's really freaking nice. But Linux is being a little bit annoying with me right now, and
Yeah,
I
that's
would like I'd like to kind of get some attention on some of the bugs that I've been having with Linux, and I figured the podcast would be a nice way to kind of both tell my story as a blind game developer and get some attention on some bugs.
Mhm. Well, I guess we should probably start with that. So, most people probably have like this idea in their mind of what it means to be blind. Like they'll have this idea of like, oh, you can see everything or you can see nothing. But like clearly you have the
Yeah,
ability to see some amount. So what
yeah.
specifically like is your blindness like?
Okay. So the first thing about my blindness is it's degenerative.
Mhm.
It's a condition I was born with as a kid, obviously, and it basically causes my retinas to, for lack of a better term, commit suicide as I age.
Uh-huh.
Um, so my blindness is I still have like quite a lot of vision left. Like I can see everything that's around me, and I can to an extent read what's on my screen, but it's not nearly as good as most people's. Like I can still walk around and like cross streets and stuff like that. That was a skill to learn. But when using a computer, I have to basically have everything dark mode and like really excessive dark mode to the point where the background's black and the text is mostly white. And then I end up zooming into the screen like 15 times.
Mhm.
And um I I can read, but I have a secondary condition thanks to optic nerve damage or muscular damage. I don't know, that causes my eyes to basically ache back and forth constantly, unless I really concentrate to keep them still. So reading for me is like maybe one or two words a second.
Mhm.
And that's where I try to use text to speech as an assist. But the goal for me is to not use text to speech as much as possible. I shouldn't be relying on it to use the computer
Mhm.
because I still have that little bit of vision left and I'd like to use it.
And somehow with that you are a game developer.
Yeah. So I learned programming shortly after I was diagnosed with the condition. I was
Mhm.
diagnosed at 10 years old in grade 3. And even before the diagnosis, that was when my ability to read pen and paper was starting to go. Like I could read it if the lighting was good enough,
Mhm.
but if the teacher ever turned the lights off, I couldn't read pen and paper. So they ended up setting me up on a computer in the classroom right next to the actual smartboard. And I would take my notes in Microsoft Word or Smart Notebook or whatever I ended up using back then. I don't know. But either way, I ended up using a computer all the time at school. And at home, I ended up getting really interested into PlayStation console modding. And I was also really interested in like hacking and cybersecurity and stuff like that, like the Hollywood kind of portrayal of it. But the first line of code I ever wrote was actually HTML on a PlayStation Portable.
Okay, sure. That's in the origin
Yeah,
story.
yeah. Um, that was my start. Was literally doing HTML on a PSP,
Mhm.
and I ended up making this mobile website type thing. I don't know why I called it mobile, but like the tool that I used was made for making mobile sites at the time, and I ended up putting a bunch of Flash games on it, and people in the class saw the website and we would have free time, and I would see people on my website playing Flash games that I put on it, and I'm like, okay, people actually want to use my stuff. Let's do even more of it.
Actually, before we get into like the games you've actually worked on, what was your favorite Flash game?
Honestly, it's hard to remember the names. There's so many.
That's fair.
One of the ones in grade 6 that I used to play all the time was one called Run, and then the sequel version, Run 2. It's kind of like this pseudo 3D game where you're this little character running through this tunnel, and the tunnel has holes in it, and you have to.
Yep, I do know exactly the one you're talking about. Yes.
I used to really love that one. That used to be like a big time killer when I'd be done assignments, because by grade 4 the school had given me my own laptop, so I was able to like play Flash games whenever I wanted if I was done, and the teacher didn't care. So I spent a lot of time playing Run and Run 2. Bloons Tower Defense, I used to like the original, but there was like another Bloons type game where it wasn't really tower defense, it was more like you kind of aim the arrow at a bunch of balloons and you try to take as many of them out as possible. And the level completes when you take them all out and you have like a limited amount of arrows. I used to like that one. I don't know what it's called. Then there was this other one that I used to play where it was like you have to like blow up this bomb type thing to get some robot or something to an objective point, and it was kind of one of those, kind of like Inkball in Windows Vista. I really like that one. And yeah, I could go on and on about all the different Flash games I've played, but honestly, those were the main ones for me.
Well, as for the games that you have specifically worked on, then let's move over to that. There are 2 links you sent me. One was for Socially Distant, the other one was for Restitched. Pick whichever one you want to talk about first.
I'll talk about Restitched because it's the one I'm most well known for.
Okay.
So a lot of the big driving force for me to getting into game development specifically was Little Big Planet. On the PlayStation 3, I used to have Little Big Planet 2, and I remember seeing the trailer for it and seeing them like show off all these different kinds of games that people made in LVP. People have made Pac-Man and Space Invaders and all these different arcade games that would not have been possible in Little Big Planet 1. And I'm like, holy crap, I want this. So I ended up playing Little Big Planet. I got it for my birthday, I think in like 2012. And I fell in love with the logic system, and I couldn't make anything useful in it, but I loved it because it was a way to like add interactivity to the level that I just could not do in LBP1. And fast forward 9 years, and Little Big Planet I don't have it anymore. Like, I have the PS3, but the only disc that I have that was working was LVP3, and it stopped working, and I couldn't afford to buy a new version of LVP or anything like that, and I came across a project called Restitched by a company called Trixel Creative. And at the time, it was very early on, and they weren't accepting new team members. It was like very early. But in 2021-ish, the Little Big Planet servers went down because someone hacked them, because of course they did. And Restitch was looking for new programmers at coincidentally the same time. So I applied in April 2021, and over the summer I started working to kind of practice like what it would be like to develop a Little Big Planet type system. I actually wrote auto hotkey if it were Little Big Planet logic. And the lead programmer of Restitched at the time, Raphael, he saw that, and he didn't think I was really up to snuff. But Halston saw it. Halston's like the main guy. He runs Trixel. And he's like, no, you need to give this blind person a shot. He might not be able to show skills off in a portfolio or anything, but trust me on this. You need him on the team. And then I got the email. And then I did my trial dev for 1 month at the time. It's actually 3 months now. But I ended up writing the game's audio system. That was the first thing that I did. And then I started doing some of the level editing tools. And then in April of 2022, Raphael, something about his contract with his employer, something changed and he could no longer lead program the game. And he handed the torch to me, and I've been lead programmer ever since. And at this point, literally based on Git status, I have written half of the current code base.
Wow.
Which is terrifying. But, like, the game has Steam Workshop support now. I wrote that.
I thought there was something about the game that looked familiar when I saw the trailer. The Little Big Planet stuff did not click with me, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. We don't want to be just like Little Big Planet.
Sure,
Obviously, there is some of that DNA there, because it is a 2.5D platformer. Little Big Planet is a 2.5D platformer.
Sure.
Trixel itself used to be a group of Little Big Planet creators. So, like, I was not around when they were, but they used to be, and so that's where a lot of that DNA comes from, is a lot of us love Little Big Planet, and we want to create that kind of magic for people on PC. And, maybe even people on Linux, if I can figure out how to get that working properly.
Have you tried running it through Proton and just see what happens, or is it just not working?
Well, I don't know how much I can say, because I am a little bit under NDA.
Sure.
But I do have a Steam Deck, and the game is installed on it, and it does boot.
Okay, well, that's something. I'd imagine there would be, or if you wanted to go like down the route of getting like Steam Deck verified, there'd be some extra stuff to do. But like just having it, knowing that it boots on Linux that's good enough for the most part.
Yeah, and it does run natively under Linux. There's some graphical issues and stuff like that, but I'm obviously on Linux right now.
Sure.
And I have the code for the game and the Unity project, and it works. It boots. It runs. Like, you can play it.
Right.
I just don't know if it's optimized.
Right. That's fair. That's fair. So, as for this other project you have...
Socially distant. So, like I said, I am very into hacking and cybersecurity, and I've always wanted to make something like Watch Dogs as a kid. Like, that was another big dream that I had, was making my own version of Watch Dogs. But obviously, I don't have the ability to do that. I'm one person. There's no way I'm ever coming close to Ubisoft.
Look, to be fair, Ubisoft didn't have the ability to make it, and that's why it got fairly downgraded.
Fair point, but, they at least were able to 3D model a city. I can't even 3D model a cube. But, with Socially Distant, it actually was in development for as long as I've been programming. It under different names and constant rewrites and stuff like that. It's kind of... It started out as me creating, like, a virtual operating system environment in, like, Windows forms. In C#, and that was how I learned how to program in C#, was doing that. I would create all these little different apps, like a terminal and a file browser and all this stuff. And that itself was inspired by another project doing the same thing called ShiftOS. We don't talk about ShiftOS, but I ended up in 2017, I got kind of bored with the whole just creating an operating environment type thing, and I wanted to turn it into a hacking game, because at that point I had played games like Hacknet and Uplink and Mud, and I didn't really like them because they weren't super realistic or challenging. Like, to their credit, they are fun games. Like, they are visually interesting. They have a lot of neat mechanics and puzzles, but it's not the type of hacking game that I like, that I'd want to play. It's a lot of repeated actions. Like, most of Hacknet early game is just SSH crack 22, and then port hack, and then wait, and then do your thing, and then disconnect. And it's like, no, I don't want to play that all day. So with Socially Distant and the earlier version of it in 2017, I wanted to basically tell a story, but also kind of recreate or kind of gamify realistic real life hacking. So in Socially Distant, for example, I have basically layers 1 through 3 of the OSI model of like the internet simulated in game. So like there's a concept of Ethernet and Wi-Fi in the game. There's network interface cards and Ethernet ports and connections and IP addresses, subnets, all this stuff.
So you've made Wireshark the game.
Basically, yeah. It's I haven't recreated TCP, but I actually have my own communication protocol that the game uses in that simulation. And it's very technical, but what it lets me do is it lets me go even more advanced than a game like Hacknet, where all the computers just have public IP addresses or domain names. Now you have like corporate networks where you have like one public address with like port forwarding rules. Maybe port 80 goes to one computer in the network, and then your SSH goes to another computer, or maybe isn't even open at all. Or maybe it's only available to certain other IP addresses. And there's like the ability to do VPNs and stuff like that in the game simulation. And what that lets me do is create missions where it's less about getting into a computer and more getting into a network and getting into the right computer to get the to get the data that you want. Because if you hack into a corporate website, you're probably not going to get their database right away.
Sure.
You're probably going to have to move through their network and discover other computers and hack into those. And then, so, yeah, that's kind of the big thing of Socially Distant, is making the hacking system more true to real life. And then, of course, with the whole pandemic happening in 2020, that was where the story and the name came from. The entire narrative of the game is like this massive ransomware attack hitting all of the healthcare system and stuff like that in the middle of a pandemic. And then, just spoiler alert, you are the one who accidentally launched the malware attack, and you're the one as the player who has to stop it. So that's the entire premise of the game, is you were kind of tricked into or framed into launching this massive attack on cyberspace, and it's your job to clean up the mess and not get arrested.
That does sound fun. It sounds like a lot of it's gonna go way over my head. But for someone who's like interested in like that side of computing, that sounds like a really cool concept.
Yeah, I'm glad you feel that way, because I struggle with kind of making the game fun to play, because obviously being the developer of the game, I know exactly how it works and how to use it and how to make things happen.
Right.
I don't know what it's like as a player, and I won't know until I get a playtest build out or something to get people's feedback. But I'm glad that I'm able to like articulate my idea for the game and have people go, okay, this sounds cool. I don't know if it's my thing, but it sounds cool.
Yeah,
that really means a lot.
I don't like networking, so I'm not the person who's gonna ever be interested in this. But for the people who are, assuming it all comes together, that does sound like a cool concept.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it to come out. Of course, it's going to be a few years.
Right, okay. Well, yeah, considering what you're trying to do, like, how far do you want to go with that? Like, you said you've already implemented 3 layers of the LSI layer. Like, are you going to be, like, re-implementing, like, a database? Like, how, because you could go as far as you wanted with this. There's got to be a cutoff point somewhere, though.
I'm not going to write MySQL. Not going to happen. Once you get past layer 3 of the simulation, like, the application layer is completely gamified. Like, when you go to a website, all it's gonna do is like check some metadata in the save file and figure out what Unity prefab to load. That's
Right.
all it's gonna do.
Right.
But as far as like traversing a network and getting into it, I wanted to have that be super realistic because I don't want it to just be like Hacknet early game where it's press hack and wait. I don't want that. I actually want you to like figure out. I want you to explore the networks in the game's world. Is what I really want.
Yeah, that does sound really cool. I might try it when it comes out eventually. As I said, I am not the audience for it, but I know I know there are people out there that enjoy networking. Clearly, you enjoy like understanding the concepts of networking. Otherwise, you wouldn't have sat down and wrote a game like this. So I'm sure there are other people out there that feel very similar about that.
It's funny you say that because not just networking I enjoy. Obviously, I do enjoy understanding how the internet works and what goes on behind the scenes. But I also enjoy understanding how operating systems work. And I've wanted to build my own OS in the past, but that's just not gonna happen. I'm not gonna be the next Linus Torvalds. Not in the cards for me. But I do like implementing a lot of those concepts that you see in something like the Linux kernel. For example, I have like a full process tree and user system in the game so that you actually have to deal with privilege escalation. Like, if you hack into a computer, you will not get root. You have to get root. So that's part of it. And then obviously when you're using the in-game OS, you're actually using a shell that is, for better or for worse, a re-implementation of Bash.
Jesus Christ. Yeah.
I do believe I have overwhelmed Brody Robertson.
I'm just impressed that you decided to go make something like this because, as you said, yeah, a lot of there are some hacking games that go very deep on like specific things. I know there's a game, I'm blanking on the name, that goes like really deep on assembly, but I don't know of one that goes deep on like network infrastructure and like network configuration.
Yeah, I'd say the closest one that I can think of that goes deep into it is Uplink. But that came out in 2001, and back then people were still like mostly on dial-up.
Right.
And you can tell that it's from 2001.
Oh,
the UI
God.
looks like it's from 2001, and the game renders at like 800 by 600, and a lot of the hacking is based around dial-up modems and traversing phone lines and stuff like that. It's a little dated.
Just seeing the pictures of the people in here makes it clear how dated it is. Like on the Steam page, there's this dude that has like blonde frosted tips. This is beautiful.
Unfortunately, I have no idea what you mean because I'm blind.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you know what we should talk about?
What?
The accessibility stuff. We're like half an hour into the show. We haven't even touched on that yet.
Okay. Yeah. So, obviously, I'm doing this blind, and it's definitely a challenge. I'm used to it being a challenge because whenever I was being given school computers, they had them like group policy to hell to the point where you couldn't even change the desktop background. Which also meant you couldn't activate the high contrast theme without tricks and abusing kind of flaws in Windows XP to get it. So I'm used to really struggling with accessibility tools because at the time I just didn't have access to them. Like, they were blocked away by group policy. But once I got into high school and I had my own laptop running Windows 7, I had the ability to do the Windows Arrow stuff, so I could use the screen magnifier and the color inversion, and that really changed things for me. But back then, things were still light mode by default.
Right.
Like, you wouldn't download a program for Windows and have it be dark mode. That was not a thing. Windows 10 screwed that up. Because now everything can be dark mode except when it's not, because it's a dialog box from 1994. Windows is a mess now for accessibility. Not because the tools are bad. Like, the magnifier in Windows is the best magnifier of all of desktop operating systems. I am very happy saying that. It's not great, but it's the best we have.
Have you tried macOS? Or I don't know. I have no idea what the experience is like on that side.
I ended up buying a Mac Mini to do restitch testing on because we also want to support Mac. And the magnifier on there works exactly the way I expected to, except for one little issue. The further you zoom in, the slower your mouse cursor moves. Because what Apple's trying to do is make it so that the mouse is moving across the physical display and not the virtual workspace.
Right.
So they slow your mouse movement down as you zoom into the screen, and there's no way to turn that off.
I was going to say, I understand that as an option, but it shouldn't be the only option.
Yeah, it's right up there with proportional zoom. It should not be the default, but it should be an option.
We'll definitely get to that. I want to talk about Windows first, though. So yeah.
So Windows it was great in Windows 7 and Windows 8 even. Like, I loved Windows 8. I know it's controversial with Windows 8 because that was when they added the Metro UI, and a lot of stuff became like these full screen apps that nobody could figure out how to get out of. Like, back then it was easier to quit Vim than it was to quit the Windows Store. But for me, I already use everything basically full screen all the time. Because I'm zoomed into the screen, and I don't always have my taskbar visible, so I'm very used to having everything full screen and doing Alt-Tab or whatever to switch between things. So Windows 8 was fine. I loved it. Windows 10, I first started getting turned off of Windows when they actually broke magnifier in Windows 10 RTM. There was this bug where if you opened a UWP app, which at that point was like half the operating system, even settings was UWP, the magnifier just would completely glitch out and the entire screen would go black except for the little area of the screen where the UWP app would be rendering if it wasn't zoomed in, and it made my computer literally unusable. And then Windows 10 Threshold comes out and it fixes it a little bit, but it breaks it some more, and now everything's like OpenAL or DirectX triangles stabbing me in the eye. They fixed it in Creators Update, but they should have not broken it in the first place. And then I think in like Fall Creators Update, they did some overhaul to the magnifier UI, and they kind of made it more of a UWP type app. Before then, it was just a little window that popped up when you opened it, and you'd have your zoom in, your zoom out, and then some options for like color inversion, stuff like that. But when you're not using it, it gets out of the way and turns into a magnifying glass that follows you around. Unless you minimize it, in which case it just stays in the taskbar and you can open it whenever you want. But as of, I believe, Fall Creators Update, once they did the UWP overhaul or whatever, it stopped doing the magnifying glass thing, and it just follows you around everywhere as a topmost window. And at the level I zoom in, which is like 1600% in Windows, the magnifier takes up half my screen.
Right.
So I have to minimize it. Otherwise, I just cannot see anything because there's a magnifier window in the way. Windows 11. This is when I started needing to use text-to-speech for a lot of things because of the condition where my eyes ache. I don't use Windows Narrator. There was a time where I needed to, because of a surgery I had on my eyes last year. I needed to recover. Like, I was completely blind. So, for those of you out there who are completely blind, I know what it's like. It's not fun. But the text-to-speech voice, Microsoft David Desktop, they've had it since Windows 8. And in Windows 8, The only thing wrong with it was that it mispronounced Linux as Linux. That was the only thing wrong with it. Other than that, it was perfect. And Windows 10, they fixed the Linux bug. So it pronounces Linux properly. Windows 11, every update, they hamstring the speech API, the SAPI engine, little by little, every update. Now it cannot pronounce conversion correctly.
What?
Like, I did a test on your Discord server. I typed out the word converted, and conversion. I read it with eSpeak on Linux, and it pronounces it converting, converted, conversion. Windows, it goes converting, converted, conversion. And I'm like, what the hell?
Okay.
Why does it pronounce it like that?
I get the Linux one, but like how do you not handle a word that like a standard English word?
Especially when it handled it properly in a previous build. Like, what the hell? My theory, now obviously I don't know what the hell's going on at Microsoft, and I don't care. But my theory is that when you open Windows Narrator, what it does now is it prompts you to download a bunch of natural sounding voices to your computer that I guess are like built on AI models, and they sound okay. But my theory is that they're kind of hamstringing the old sappy style robot-y voice that Microsoft David Desktop and Microsoft Sam and all those are. They're hamstringing them to kind of subtly influence us blind people to go get the natural sounding voices so they don't have to maintain the freaking narrator voices from the past anymore. And I hate that. Like, stop doing that, Microsoft. If that's what you're doing, I will find you. I don't like how they make me download natural sounding voices. Because first of all, the first thing that it does is it tries to change the voice based on like detecting tone or something like that. Like sometimes it'll swap over to a female voice or a different accent or a different language if it detects that.
Okay.
Stop it. If I'm reading source code and it interprets it as Japanese, like I can't read that code anymore. Like, just use the robot voice. Let it spell things out that it doesn't recognize, or skip over, like, symbols and stuff like that. Stop with the natural-sounding voices. First of all, they take up disk space that they don't need to take up. And second of all, the point of a screen reader voice is not to sound like a human being. It's to be understandable and consistent, and consistently working. It's literally your eyesight at some point. So it needs to work. It cannot rely on the internet, because if your internet goes down, you're fucked.
Right.
It cannot rely on, like, AI models, because AI models hallucinate, they make mistakes, and then you end up with conversion. Or, you know, reading C# code as Russian. Like, come on, stop the AI. I just want my robot-y voice, and Linux gives me that.
How well does the TTS work across applications on Windows? Like, are there any places where you find where it just doesn't do anything? Or like, how does the TTS how does it actually function for you?
So, like I said, I try not to use narrator.
Sure.
I try to only use text-to-speech as an assist. So in Discord, there's a feature where I can right-click a message and hit speak message, and it will go through narrator. There's some hacky stuff you got to do to get that working on Linux, but on macOS and Windows, it works perfectly. But when I had to use narrator, the UWP apps mostly worked fine. Browsing the internet, no. Like, if I tried to use Google Docs, no way. Even with the text-to-speech support turned on in Google Docs options, it just would not work with narrator. Or if I tried to, like, browse a very heavy JavaScript website, for example, none of that would work. Even using narrator in Discord was inconsistent, because typing in the chat box, it's supposed to narrate every keystroke. So if I type in A, it'll say A. And the idea behind that is, well, if you're fully blind, you don't have the ability to proofread your text because you can't see it.
Sure.
So it's nice to be able to hear what you're typing as you type it. And it's supposed to, when you hit the space bar, read the previous word and tell you if there's a mistake.
Right.
But I type fast enough to crash that. So it just gives up until I restart narrator.
All right, sure.
Yeah.
So you were saying about the natural sounding and the robotic voices. So you have a preference towards the robotic voices, then?
Yeah.
Do you feel like
I will...
sorry, I'll let you say what you're gonna say in a sec. But I was gonna ask you, do you have do you feel like the natural voices kind of sound uncanny, or is it just the fact that they sometimes just make things up?
It's both. I find them really uncanny. For me, I have selective hearing, and when I'm using a screen reader, I don't want to hear a human.
Right.
I want to hear a screen reader, and they have distinct voices. I don't want it trying to infer tone. Like, maybe do the little rise in your speech when you're reading a question mark. Like, that's okay.
Sure.
But, like, don't try to detect language and stuff like that and tone. I just want it to read the words. And I want it to read it as fast as possible with no lag. And the robot-y voices are really nice for that because they've been pretty much the same since 2001. Like, they can run on an ancient Pentium and read perfectly fine. Whereas the natural sounding voices, not only are they very uncanny, but they're more intensive on the system. So there's a delay between you actually telling it to read something and it reading it, because it has to process everything a lot more. And I don't like that. I just want it to work.
Right. So you're also saying before that you don't like relying on the TTS. Why is that?
Because a lot of apps are broken,
Sure.
and I still have sight left. TTS is there. I like it to be there and functioning when I need it. Like when I'm reading long paragraphs, that's where I struggle with, because it genuinely saves time. If I right-click on a message you send me, 2 seconds listening to it versus 2 minutes trying to read it, I'll go with the text-to-speech. But if I'm just navigating a context menu or a dialog box and the set of options, or I'm searching for a program, it's 1 or 2 words, maybe 3 or 4. I can read that perfectly fine, just zoomed in. So, in those cases, it's actually faster for me to not wait for a text-to-speech voice to figure out what I'm hovering over, what I've had selected, and, maybe some GUI toolkits don't have accessible objects defined so the screen reader just doesn't see them. I don't want to deal with that. But I also want my text-to-speech to be there if and when I absolutely need it.
Right, that's understandable.
Yeah.
Is there any other tooling on Windows that you rely upon using?
Stuff I didn't write on my own? No. I'm just Windows magnifier. I use the SAPI APIs directly in a lot of my own tools. And then, other than that, it's mostly just the Discord speak message feature, which is a Discord thing.
Right.
And when I'm browsing the internet, I use Google Chrome, and there's an extension called, I believe, like Read and Write Text to Speech for Chrome. I think it also has a Firefox version. Or it might be Read Aloud. I can't remember. I've tried 2 of them. And what it lets me do is it lets me highlight text, and I right-click it, and there's an option that says Read Aloud Selected Text, and that basically makes the internet usable for me. So that's basically all the tooling that I would use on a Windows system. It's mostly just default stuff and stuff I wrote myself.
What's this stuff you wrote yourself? What have you actually got?
So far I have a plugin for the JetBrains IDEs. It's tested on the IntelliJ IDEA base, and then JetBrains Writer. And it's a plugin that lets me do exactly what the Chrome extension does, except instead of highlighting text on a web page, it's highlighting code in the code editor. So I can highlight code or comments and stuff like that and right-click it and read it aloud. And I'm so familiar with C# that I don't need to hear a lot of the symbols, like the curly braces and stuff like that, to understand what your code is doing, because I still have... I can see the color and the indentation and stuff like that, and I have like my own style guide for how I write code.
Mm-hmm.
So for reading like variable names and function names and stuff like that, I just wrote a plugin that lets me highlight them and read them. Mm-hmm. And then I wrote, because Windows doesn't have like an easy command line interface for the narrator or the sappy voices, I just wrote a C# app that uses .NET 3.5 and the speech synthesizer library, and it reads stuff from standard input and just sends that straight to Sappy. And then that's what my read aloud plugin for Writer sends to. So it's very specific to my computer. And the reason I did it that way is because I originally wrote that plugin for Linux using eSpeak. And eSpeak is a command line utility.
Yep. Was there not any like existing plugins for TTS in like the JetBrains tools? Because I assume like writing your own wasn't like the first thing you would decide to do.
I've tried to look for them, but there is a toggle in the user interface setting that like enables screen reader support. But it doesn't work with Windows Narrator in my experience. So that's not helpful. And I tried to look for plugins that were just simple highlight text and read it aloud. Couldn't find any.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I guess that's good enough reason to write your own then.
Yep.
So, you mentioned theming. Most people, when they have a theme for like a text editor, code editor, whatever, like they do it because they think it looks cool. What specifically, like, is your theme like?
I want mine to look cool.
Sure.
But I also need it to be very high contrast. I don't like the stereotypical blind person high contrast theme that you get in like GNOME or Windows and stuff like that. It looks horrible.
Windows, high contrast.
Like,
I've never seen it actually. High contrast.
Yeah, it's
theme. Let's have a look.
Imagine Windows, but like they tried to make it Hollywood Hacker and failed miserably. That's what it looks like to me.
Right. It's a very, very, very functional theme as opposed to anything trying to look good. For anyone just listening, basically the entire background is black. The header is white. It still has really tiny text for some reason, which I guess, you know, if you don't need to worry about that. Yeah, just Windows. And then any of the... Not any, okay. This is actually a really inconsistent theme as well. Once again, Windows. A lot of the buttons are highlighted in, like, fluorescent green, except the buttons to close the window, which I don't know why they're not highlighted. And then on the web... It looks like all text just gets turned to yellow.
Yeah, and
this is very inconsistent. What is this? There's
a lot of thick white or whatever color it is borders that just look overwhelmingly bad. And I my hate for high contrast themes like that doesn't just come from the way they look. It comes from back when the old Windows Classic engine was still a thing in Windows 7. They took it out in Windows 8 and they redid the high contrast theme and haven't changed it since. But in Windows 7, if I enabled the high contrast theme, it would revert to the classic theme system, which turns off the desktop window manager, which makes the Windows magnifier non-functional. Because it relies on the DWM. It relies on the compositor to do the zooming.
Oh my god.
So, like, I cannot use this. It is not possible. I cannot use high contrast and zoom into the screen at the same time. They fixed it in Windows 8, but they didn't make it look any better.
Jesus Christ. Incredible design from Microsoft.
Yep. So, my preferred theme is more of a OLED style dark theme, because with the OLED screens, the big thing with them is they have like infinite black levels, because when you render black on a OLED screen, you're turning the pixel off.
Right.
And so for Discord, I have on mobile I use the Discord AMOLED dark theme that they've had in experiment for like years.
Mm-hmm.
They keep breaking it, but when it's fixed, it works fine. And then I willingly and openly break the Discord TOS by using custom CSS to do the AMOLED theme on desktop because a friend made it for me.
That's bad.
And it's open source too. Yeah, how could I make my program easy to see? How could I? How dare I? But anyway, I haven't been banned for it yet. But yeah, I do that. And then for the NetBrains IDEs, I use a theme called Darkula Pitch Black.
I think I have one.
Yeah, it's basically the default NetBrains idea theme, but instead of a dark gray background, it's black. And a lot of the elements are like brighter. So it's kind of this mix between a high contrast theme and actually looking good.
Yep.
The only thing that I don't like about it is the actual syntax highlighting theme. The highlight for what line you're on looks a little too bright to me, and it's a little low contrast, but I can obviously edit that.
Sure, yep.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a good picture of it, but the JetBrains website is terrible. Okay. To anybody out there who makes a website, if I click view the image in a new tab, can you not make it so it tries to download the image? Don't do that. That's bad web design. Just stop it.
Oh man,
I hate these people so much.
Don't necessarily blame NetBrains for that. Blame Chrome for that, because there was a recent update where they completely changed how downloads work. It used to be, and it screwed up my muscle memory for months. It used to be like you download something and it pops up in the bottom left, and then like it shows the progress, and you can click on that to open it. Now it like goes into a drop-down menu. Sometimes it just doesn't even show up. And a lot of times, if it's a recognized file type, like an image, it just downloads it and immediately opens it in the photo viewer, and I hate it. Like, just put it in the in the bottom left and let me deal with it when I want to deal with it, okay?
Yup. So stupid. So, okay, so we know what tools you use on Windows. We know what the experience is like on Windows.
Yeah.
What about the Linux side? I know right now you're using KDE, but you have messed around with GNOME as well.
Yeah. So obviously right now I'm using KDE. I've messed around with GNOME. I've messed around with Cinnamon.
Okay.
XFCE.
Mm-hmm.
I've used Mate in the past. And I've tried to use Qtile and Fluxbox.
Okay.
Qtile and Fluxbox, literally impossible to use. Literally impossible, because they're X11 window editors, and you don't get a compositor by default, and there's no standalone compositor that I know of that can work with a tiler or a standalone WM that lets you zoom into the screen. Maybe PyCom can do it with a plugin.
Yeah, I don't think PyCom... I actually don't know. I've never heard of it.
Even if it could, it's completely moot, because I need my computer to be usable for me to set that up. And without the zoom feature, it's not usable, so I can't set it up.
Right, you're not going to get too far with the TTY.
Yeah. Especially when the NVIDIA drivers render the TTY at your monitor's native resolution, which for me is 4K. You're not gonna read that!
I think there's probably like a config... I know there is a way to change it, but to change it, you also need to be able to see it, which is a problem.
Yeah. So obviously using the TTY, no. Using a standalone Xorg window manager, no, not possible. Mate and XFCE, I think they have lightweight compositors built into them. I think, actually, I think Mate is still using Metacity. And then XFCE has XFWM, which I think has a zoom feature. The problem is they're very limiting in what you can do with them. And So for those, I used to use Compiz. And Compiz works, but Compiz is also Compiz.
Right.
So it crashes a lot. It's
Yeah.
very hard on your system, and it's Compiz. And the way it handles multi-monitor zoom is very peculiar because it treats each monitor as its own workspace, which sounds good on paper. But then moving between your monitors when you have them at inconsistent zoom levels is really janky. So I stopped using that. Cinnamon and Gnome, I believe they both use Mutter. I could be wrong.
Yes.
I know Gnome does, but I don't know about Cinnamon. But either way...
I believe it's a fork of Mutter.
Well, either way, fork or not, they both have this really nasty bug zooming in non-proportional mouse movement mode, where when you first enable it, completely fine. If you have a single monitor, completely fine. If your monitors are lined up perfectly with the default settings, completely fine. But if you have multiple monitors, and any one of them you reconfigure, like you move it around, you log out, and it doesn't matter if you're in Xorg or Wayland, you log out, you log back in, and it'll work for like the first few seconds. You'll be able to move your mouse, zoom in, and everything will work. And then, I don't know what it does, but out of random, it just completely gives up. And it stops tracking the mouse. You cannot move your mouse. You cannot pan the zoom area. And if you zoom in and out, you will start writing garbage to your video memory. And the system becomes literally unusable until you disable zoom. And the only way to get around it is disable zoom, get someone with eyesight to go into the settings, turn on proportional movement, turn zoom back on, then turn it off. And then it's fine until you log out again.
Yeah, that would be nice. If there was a command line interface to just enable it, so you can just hotkey it when it breaks.
There is, but there is G settings that you can like mess.
Is there a
around
G
with the
setting to do that specific thing, though?
There is.
Okay,
there is.
okay.
It just doesn't work if you do it from a script, because the script runs too fast.
Okay, right.
I have tried that.
Okay.
And the only reason that I know that it's G settings is because GNOME, to this day, does not have the ability to set a hotkey for toggling color inversion. I had to write that myself.
What?
They have the G settings key for it. They have it in the dconf editor. It's just not in the UI.
What? Why?
GNOME!
Is this...
And it's the same thing. Actually, I kind of lied there. It's not that they just don't have a keybind that you can set for color inversion. There is toggle for it in the UI, so I'm mistaken there. What I was thinking of there was focus tracking and caret tracking. Focus tracking is when you have an application that pops up and like a button goes into keyboard focus or a text box goes into focus. The zoom is supposed to like warp over to where that thing is.
Right.
Some people might like that. I hate it because anytime there's a notification or something that pops up, it tries to grab focus and it zaps me away from whatever I'm doing.
Yeah,
I hate it.
Okay.
And then caret tracking is where when you're typing, the zoom area follows the text cursor. And I also don't like that because whenever I'm typing, I obviously want to be proofreading as I go, but I need to keep the zoom area still, otherwise I lose focus, and I have to like force my eyes to refocus, and it's a mental nightmare for me. So I don't like having those. GNOME has them on by default. No user interface to turn them off. You can do it in dconf editor. You can do it with any settings in the command line. But they didn't bother to put toggles in the main accessibility settings. GNOME!
Well, GNOME, at least, people describe it as a platform that really cares about like fixing accessibility problems. So hopefully someone like can address that.
I hope so. I've obviously tried to report the really annoying bug where like the graphics card just starts spewing garbage into the VRAM when you try to zoom into the screen. It never really went anywhere because what happened was I was on Ubuntu 22.04, which was like GNOME 43. And they took a look at my Mutter version and went, "This is too old. Go away." And I'm like, "What do you want me to do?"
Do you know what problem?
Because I recreated it on ARM.
Right.
What?
Okay. Oh, so it does occur in the new version then.
Yeah. And I think it still does to this day, and I don't want to test because I have a functioning system and I don't want to end up with a non-functioning system.
Understandable. Yep.
And then there's KDE.
Yes.
Which, I owe you a hug.
Okay.
First and foremost. Because yesterday I made a video showing off this one subtle little bug in KDE. Where the zoom works perfectly, the exact way that I want it to. Just the way that it figures out when I'm pushing against the edge of the screen is a little bit buggy and does not account for multiple monitors that aren't aligned. So I made a video demonstrating that. Now, in the video, I said that I don't know how to use Bugzilla, and I don't. Bugzilla's a mess. But I forgot to mention the fact that I actually reported that bug to KDE a long time ago. And the thing is, I forgot that I did. Because when I submitted the bug, I didn't have any indication that the submit was actually successful.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't get an email or anything to tell me, hey, this actually went through.
This isn't a you problem, this is just Bugzilla. I don't like Bugzilla either.
So, a couple months later, I forget about it because I'm back on Windows 11. And a few days ago, preparing for the podcast, I switched back to Linux because I want to be immersed in the current state of things and figure out if some of these bugs I've had in the past are fixed. Because I don't want to describe a bug that's happened in the past that has been actually fixed.
Sure.
Because that's not fair.
Well, imagine having
as a developer, I know that's annoying. But the bug was still happening, and I'm like, oh my god, they still haven't fixed this. So I wanted to make that video, because in the bug report, I didn't have any screenshots or any way of like actually showing what's going wrong, because I couldn't take any at the time. If I tried to take a screenshot of the bug in Spectacle, it just does not show up. It actually shows the area of the screen that I can't see. So I can't do that. And obviously, using a phone to take a screenshot, I don't like using my phone for anything other than, like, a phone. It's very difficult. And I don't know how to get the picture off my phone and onto Bugzilla. And I couldn't have recorded the video at the time because OBS was a lot more unstable for me back then, and the mistake was that I was using the Arch Linux package of it. I was not using the Flatpak. Flatpak works great now.
It does, yeah. I keep telling people, stop using the Arch package. The Arch team does not know how to package it properly.
Yeah, Flatpak works wonderfully. It has trouble finding my NVENC encoder, but I'm
to be fair,
that problem by not using NVIDIA.
I've had the same thing happen with my AMD encoder as well. That's not, and that's just an OBS problem.
But yeah, so obviously the bug report didn't have any visual, like, any visual description of this is what's happening. It just went by my text and how to reproduce it. So I make that video, I send it to you, you watch it, which is already means a lot to me, and then you post it on Mastodon, which I completely didn't expect. This is why I owe you a hug. And I wake up at like 6 a.m. this morning to an email from Bugzilla, and I sent you a picture of it. It was kind of truncated because it was in my notifications, but I had it going through the screen reader, and someone else reproduced the bug. And and the issue got reopened, and that's how I got reminded that I actually made that bug report in the first place.
Right.
And then I hop on a Mastodon, and I find out everybody's like yelling at you for posting the video to Mastodon, but not making a bug report.
Okay, to be fair, GNOME developers are yelling at me. Now, I have many opinions. Look, the person was angry at me because I posted a video about an issue instead of making a bug report about it. I'm just gonna say it. I said it on Mastodon, I said it on Twitter. Bugzilla sucks. Yep. It is a terrible way to report bugs. Please, for the love of God, stop using Bugzilla. I get why users go to Reddit to complain about something, because it is so much easier to do that. I don't want to make a Bugzilla account. I want to make an account on, like, your Bugzilla and then someone else's Bugzilla. Okay, just one basic thing. Why can I not sign on with my GitHub account? Just a basic thing. That'll make it a lot easier.
I've set up GitHub OAuth for Trixel. It's like 2 minutes.
That's one thing. Second thing, the interface is disgusting, and KDE's is especially bad because they have like 30 different categories for every single different product they have, which makes it even worse. But I get why people just go to Reddit to complain about stuff, because it's easier. Because reporting bugs to KDE, reporting bugs to Mozilla, reporting bugs to Red Hat is disgusting. I hate it, and I don't like doing it. I will do it because I know how to do it, but if someone doesn't, I get why they don't want to.
Yeah, and I even went through the trouble of creating the account and figuring out how to submit a bug, and it went nowhere until I made the video and you posted about it.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why people were giving you crap over it, because I made the video.
Yeah, I don't know.
You just posted it.
I literally
If anything, direct it at me. Tell me to link the bug reporter to make the bug report.
Do you want to know the funniest thing about it?
What?
The KDE developers that follow me were like, they liked and reshared it. The people I was trying to get the attention of, they were like, oh, okay, thank you for the bug report. It's the people that had nothing to do with it. They were the angry ones.
Yeah, so the KDE guys are like, oh, fuck, we might want to fix this. This is it's subtle, but it's a bad accessibility bug. But the GNOME devs are like, this is not the way to do it. Use the bug tracker.
Yeah, pretty much.
GNOME, I'm coming for you. You have your own bug.
To be fair, they do use GitLab, which is a lot nicer.
Yeah, but also, I still remember the GNOME one that I reported. I have the bug on GNOME GitLab. I'll have to find a link to it. Where the one with the zoom kind of glitching out my graphics card, it also went nowhere. I don't think anybody's looked at it other than to tell me stop using GNOME 43 on Ubuntu. Has
anyone actually had any discussion on this bug you sent me? Or is it just like reopened at this point?
Someone else obviously was able to reproduce it. They're the same person that told you on Mastodon that they did. And there was another post. I don't know if the post was like from the time that I posted the bug report, or if it was recent, but someone else actually went through and said, okay, this is like kind of an unfortunate bug with how KDE works and how the Zoom plugin works, and like here's how you work around it. Basically, they said use proportional or centered mode, or move your mouse to the other monitor that you can actually pan up on and then move it back. Which are both things that I demonstrated why I don't want to do in the video, by the way.
Yeah. Okay, so there are multiple ways. Okay, actually explain how you use the Zoom, and then how the default works and why that's bad.
Okay, so the default with KDE is called proportional mouse movement. Basically what that means is as you zoom into the screen and move your mouse around, the zoom area follows the mouse cursor. So if the mouse is in the top left of the screen, the zoom area is in the top left of the screen. If the mouse moves 1 pixel down, the zoom area will move 1 pixel down.
Right.
That's okay for navigating the desktop and getting to the setting to turn it off. Because what I do is I set it into push mode, and this is how it works on Windows and macOS by default. Actually, macOS, I think it's also a setting you have to set. I think they do proportional by default. But anyway, it's still a setting on there. And it works so well in push mode that I don't even bother to care about it. But on Windows, it's the default to be push mode. And the way that works is when you move your mouse, the zoom area does not move unless you're pushing up against the edge of one of your monitors. Mm-hmm. And it will move in the direction you're pushing. And this is a very natural way to do it, which is probably why it's the default on Windows. Because if I want to move up, I just move my mouse up and keep going up until I've moved up enough. Mm-hmm. If I want to move down, I move my mouse down and keep going down until I've moved down enough. It's really natural. And I've been using it that way for the better part of 15 years. Mm-hmm. I am not changing my way of using Zoom. I'm not relearning it. And the reason that I prefer it to things like proportional or centered or any other kind of mouse tracking is whenever I'm reading, a lot of times what I will do is I will pan the zoom area over to where I want to read. Mm-hmm. And then I will hover my mouse over it to give my eyes something to focus on. And then, obviously, the mouse cursor is now in the way of what I'm trying to read, so I need to move it away. Mm-hmm. And off screen or, into some area where it's not obstructing the text. Mm-hmm. Push mode, I can do that perfectly because as long as I don't touch the edge of the screen, it won't move. Mm-hmm. But in the other modes, obviously the moment I move the mouse, the zoom area is going to move. So if I try to move the mouse away from the text I'm trying to read, now the text is gone.
Right. So it's kind of like... I guess a good way to picture it for someone who's just using a desktop normally would be, imagine you have a window. So proportional is, imagine you have a window that is glued to your mouse. And whenever you move the mouse, the window is going to move around. Whereas with the push mode, it will move when you move the mouse to the top of that window or to the sides of the window. I'm assuming centered is the same as proportional, but keeps it centered on your mouse?
Yeah. Okay. It depends. There's two variants of centered mode. There's like hybrid proportional, mm-hmm. which is where in most cases the mouse stays in the center of the screen. Mm-hmm. But when you get close enough to the edges of the workspace or the corners of the workspace, then it will go to proportional mode just to make sure that you don't end up seeing the black void that is the outside of your screens. Mm-hmm. Because on a lot of operating systems or graphics card drivers, that just causes a lot of glitches. Mm-hmm. Because either there's a black void, or particularly on Windows, you will end up with just seeing like garbage video memory or remnants of your desktop background from a previous frame, and it's really trippy.
Right.
So the hybrid proportional mode is kind of designed to make centered mode work with that. Mm-hmm. And, work around that little issue. But then there's full centered mode, where no matter where you move, even if you've got most of the black void on your screen, your mouse cursor will be in the center of the screen. So help you God.
I've not used any of these modes myself, but if I'm just, seeing how you use it here, I probably would use push mode. Push mode makes the most sense to me. And a thing about push mode, I don't know if this is possible, but a part of me would want it to be possible to control it with my my arrow keys. Just be able to pan around like that.
That's totally possible on a lot of magnifiers. Even on Windows, I believe there's a setting for it, mm-hmm. where you hit the Windows key or some other key, and then you hit the arrow keys, and you can move in that direction. I don't personally use that because I'm so used to having one hand on the mouse and one hand on the keyboard. But it is possible, mm-hmm. and it's very natural.
I would imagine if you were I could see someone using that, especially even if they don't need it for accessibility, just they have a 4K display, because 4K displays are just really stupid. They genuinely don't make any sense to use unless you have 200% zoom minimum. Yeah,
you either need 200% zoom and really good eyes, 1500% zoom and my eyes, or you need DPI scaling. Yeah. And realistically, DPI scaling to this day is still very broken.
Yeah. I think macOS is the only OS that does it well, specifically because they have such a limited range of DPIs they need to support natively.
That and macOS is very big on you use our UI toolkit or you fuck off.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Or you make your toolkit look like ours. That just make it fit with what we're doing. Otherwise, we do not care at all. Go away.
Yeah.
Okay, so
And
yeah, go on.
then Windows. I was gonna say, and then Windows is just a complete mess because they have like 15 different UI frameworks.
So I had a look at this bug report here, and it seems like there's some discussion going on. It seemed like someone might possibly have a solution that might.
What's the username of that someone?
Is it the Plex guy? Is that?
That is me.
Oh well, yeah. Okay.
I did that right.
Oh, you have a.
Yeah.
Okay, you have another username. You. Okay, you have a possible solution, assuming you know how the code base works.
Yeah, I actually someone in your Discord server actually looked through the Kwin source code and found the part of the code that handles push movement in Kwin. And I looked at the code, and I obviously am a programmer, and that's probably C++ or C maybe.
It's C++.
But it's still it's very close to what C# looks like. Because they're not using a whole lot of advanced C++ features. So I looked at that code and in my head and I'm like, this is C#. Let's read it as if it's C#. There's the bug. And then I did that write up of like how to possibly fix it and what's exactly wrong with the code. So that was me. The story behind that username is it's based on one of my emails. I have like 4 different email addresses.
Right. Well, hopefully this problem actually gets dealt with then.
Hopefully, because I really like KDE. Like, I mean, the default KDE workflow is not for me because it's very Windowsy. And I don't want to use Linux just to use Windows.
The KDE devs are not. I've brought this up to them so many times. They do not like that comparison. We're doing something completely different. This has nothing to do with Windows. Windows is actually taking stuff from us. Like, I'm sure they are. I'm
sorry, KDE, but I love you guys, but KDE 5 kind of took the super bar idea from Windows 7. It had it in 2009. I know they don't like that that comparison, but just like Restitch being compared to Little Big Planet, there's no way around it. And I don't like that workflow, not because it's a bad workflow. Like, a lot of people prefer tilers. I get that. I understand how tilers are useful to a lot of people. But for me, I need a floating window manager, even if I use everything full screen. But what I don't like is I can't do a Windows-style superbar because it's all icon-based. And a lot of these icons, unless I zoom really far in, are complete blurs of color for me. And I can't tell them easily apart. And that's even worse with minimal design. I don't like minimal icons. And I don't like the newer Windows 11 style icons either, because they're a lot of color. But what I'd like to have is, I'd like to have my app launcher type thing on the meta key. And then next to it, I usually have a global menu. And then I'd put my system tray next to that, in place of where you would have a taskbar. I know that's weird, but the system tray is more useful for me than the taskbar. And then I'll just have a gap and then the date and time. That's what I want. And then I just switch my apps through either Alt-Tab or a run menu, like maybe Rofi or D menu or something like that, where I can type in the name of an app I want to go to and switch to it. And that's why I also really wish GNOME didn't have that bug, because GNOME does that by default. You don't have a taskbar by default. You have a dash. I mean, I do turn on dash to dock. But like, when I want to switch to a program, if I have a terminal open and I hit the super key and type terminal, it opens the existing terminal. Because most of the time, I only need one terminal. I don't need 15 terminal windows open. And then with Windows and KDE right now, that ends up happening. I will have like 5 to 10 instances of console open and like 4 Chrome windows, and then it's this huge mess because some programs like Discord are single instance, Writer is single instance, but Chrome isn't, console isn't, Dolphin isn't, and I don't like that traditional Windows workflow of a taskbar. But also, KDE is the most stable desktop environment on Linux when you're me. So I kind of have to use it. I'm told that Hyperland has a plugin that can do the whole zoom thing that I need. And Vaxry also told me that I can do a screen shader to do the color inversion.
You can definitely do that, yes.
Yeah. So I'm sure I could make Hyperland work, but I'm still on NVIDIA and Wayland. Just no.
Wait, you mentioned a magnifier. I haven't. I don't know where that is.
I can't remember the name of the plugin.
Mm.
It was someone who told me about it.
Right.
But I know that it exists. I haven't looked too much into it. Because obviously, me looking into Wayland right now is completely pointless because half of the stuff that I use won't work.
Wait, did he commit this to the main branch? Wait, hold up. Hyperland cursor zoom. Is this just a feature that's in cursor underscore zoom? Oh, no, it's literally just a feature that exists in Hyperland. The factor the zoom by around the cursor, aka magnifying glass. It doesn't zoom the entire screen, but you can have like a section of the screen zoomed.
So that'd be kind of your older Windows style, and that's great. But for me, that just won't work because I need the entire screen.
Yeah, there is a whole look. If you want to learn some C++, there is a plugin framework, and you can guaranteed do it. I don't know if it exists though.
I know C++, but I know enough of it to know that I don't want to use it.
Right.
I used it for Unreal Engine way back in the day, and I'm dangerous with C++. You probably don't want me writing it.
And I'm sure crashing out of Hyperland is probably crashing out of Hyperland to a TTY is probably the best idea.
Knowing me, what I'll end up doing is I'll try to do some like hyper optimized thing with like stack allocations, and I'll accidentally buffer overrun the stack and completely crash Hyperland. And I actually did that in C# once. It's not fun to debug.
There is a way. Okay, with actually developing a Hyperland plugin, there is a way to like have a virtual Hyperland instance that is separate from your main one. So you can like test the plugin in there. So if you do break something, it doesn't kill the entire desktop, which is nice. But you know, it's still going to be a bit of work. If anyone is bored and wants to write a Hyperland extension, and that doesn't seem like a super difficult Hyperland plugin, like it would be being able to take a part of the screen, zoom in on it, and then have it move when you push your cursor against it. Obviously, you could do proportional and all that stuff as well, but just doing that. So pushing against the side, maybe add some arrow movement, and then zooming in on the screen. It seems like a fairly easy problem. I don't write Hyperland plugins, though, so I don't know. It might actually be incredibly difficult, but someone let me know. Someone who's bored, let me know.
I mean, the zoom itself is probably most likely just a shader, and then the logic to track the mouse. And even KDE's implementation of it isn't perfect. It's a very naive algorithm. But it's like not more than 10 lines of code. So I wouldn't imagine it'd be too hard to implement into Hyperland, honestly.
I do want to mess around with writing Hyperland plugins at some points. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'll write it myself. We'll see. If a plugin shows up in 6 months, you'll know who did it.
I will keep an eye out. Or an ear out.
So, is there a usability difference for you with X11 versus Wayland?
I can't fairly answer that right now.
Okay.
Because my only experience with Wayland is on an NVIDIA graphics card. And all of the tools that I use, Discord, Chrome, and the Unity editor, none of them work on Wayland on NVIDIA. Discord you can get to work by disabling APU and doing software rendering.
Right.
Chrome, you can get the UI to appear by disabling software rendering. or disabling GPU rendering,
Uh-huh.
but it will be all flickery, and you will see like your other applications popping in the background, and it's just a complete unusable mess.
Mm-hmm.
Unity editor, the game engine, they don't have Wayland support in 2021 LTS, which is what Restit uses, and Unity is the type of thing where you don't update the latest version unless you have to.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we're on 2021 LTS, which does not have any Wayland support whatsoever. So it runs under X-Wayland. And it has the same problem that Discord with graphics acceleration has on an X-Wayland and NVIDIA. It shows garbage memory all over the screen. The only thing you can see is your window decorator and the menu bar. Everything else, because it's rendered in engine using IMGUI or whatever Unity uses, is garbage. And obviously, you cannot turn off APU acceleration to get around that because it's a game engine. It needs APU acceleration. Right. It will not work without APU acceleration. So I have not had a chance to give Wayland a fair go. But I do have an AMD RX 7600 XT on the way that I'm going to replace my NVIDIA cards with. It's coming this Thursday. And I'm told by some friends who actively use the Unity editor and specifically 2021 LTS on Wayland on AMD that it's, other than a little bit of window management or window placement bug, when you have like drop downs and stuff like that, they like to appear in the top corner of the screen.
Oh, it's the top corner. That's yeah. Mine like to appear off the screen. Yeah.
There is that bug with Unity, but if you go into your window rules or something and disable like some geometry setting, it works fine on AMD. So I'm hoping that that's also the case for me, but I don't know yet. I mean, as far as KDE in Wayland, the only real issue other than the graphics card mess that I've noticed in terms of usability is the task manager, the taskbar at the bottom, tends to like forget windows in my experience. Like some of them just don't show up. I don't know if that's been fixed because the last time I tried that was last year. And X-Wayland windows, a lot of them don't have icons. So it's that yellow circle. And it's really hard to tell them apart when you already have trouble telling icons apart. Guess which yellow circle is the right program.
So that yellow circle is the Wayland logo, and this, you know what? Here's another one for the I've talked about this. This is entirely related to this protocol right here, the most controversial protocol you will ever see. Add XDG top level icon to allow Windows to set dedicated icons. This is a protocol solely based around letting Windows set an icon. That is
and you know what? We need this because guess what? Games don't generally use desktop files. Obviously, Steam might do some stuff in the background to make that work.
Yeah.
But game engines, they don't do that.
I don't know if anyone brought up the accessibility point here. No, I don't. Literally, no one has mentioned accessibility. Well, there's another.
I might have.
Yeah,
I might have to figure out how to contribute to that then.
It's just on GitLab, so you can just yeah, it'll be easy enough to work out. And you can sign up with on the free desktop one. I believe you can sign up with your GitHub account. Yeah, you can. Yes.
I don't know about free desktop. I haven't used it yet. But GNOME GitLab. I think when I tried to create my account, it was like we actively don't let you sign in with other accounts to prevent spam.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
So. Yeah.
Maybe they changed it, because I know I had an account at one point. They might have added that later on. No, they have it now, so they might have changed it then.
Yeah.
They probably were getting spammed at some point.
Though.
Yeah, at least it's not Bugzilla.
At least it's not Bugzilla. Bugzilla, when I went to use it today to write that little write-up of how you could possibly fix the Kwind bug, I could not find the add comment box. You want to know why?
Why? What's going
on? Every forum I have ever used, the add comment text field is below the comments.
Right.
On Bugzilla, it's above. So you have to scroll up. And I don't know why.
Look, it's Bugzilla. I can't give you an answer for anything on how Bugzilla is laid out. But yeah, with this icon one, definitely if you can work out how to use their GitLab, just mention it, because I'm sure, because there are so many people in here that have mentioned like why this is difficult, why we don't want to do this, why it's a bad idea, all of these different things, but just chucking in like a bit of the accessibility argument, I think would at least push the discussion in a productive way.
Yeah.
Because it seems like most people in here are interested in fixing accessibility problems. It's just a lot of people don't know about them.
Yeah, that's totally understandable, because when you're an outsider looking in, it's a lot like watching someone use Vim.
Mm-hmm.
Vim is like very, very complex. I'm not going to say complicated. I'm going to say complex, because there's difference. When you first learn it, it's like completely overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people will end up giving up in 10 minutes when they can't figure out how to like get out of the mindset of arrow keys versus HKNL, or how to exit Vim, which is the meme. But also watching someone who's very experienced in Vim, they're like warping around at like the speed of sound, and it's like, what the hell is going on? How are they so fast? It's the same thing with watching a blind person use a computer when they're used to it. At first, if you're not used to using a computer with accessibility tools, it is a pain. Even if they're rock solid. It's just not intuitive if you're used to using a computer regularly. And at the same time, watching a blind person work, first of all, you're not always going to have that option, because nobody has a camera in my bedroom watching me work.
Well,
so there's
that you know of.
that I know. I'm fairly certain. What's that red light over there? Anyway, obviously you're not always going to be able to watch a blind person work on a computer, but when you do, you're going to see them moving generally as fast as you would, and you're not going to understand what the hell they're doing, because it's a completely different paradigm. And trying to design accessibility tools around that when you don't fully understand it, it's gonna be a challenge, because you're gonna make kind of inferences. Like, obviously it's pretty natural to assume that a blind person might need a larger font, so add a larger font. That's easy. Sure. You might need high contrast, so add high contrast. But understanding the nuances of how a screen magnifier should work, or how a screen reader should interpret what's on the actual screen and how it should navigate, it basically takes being blind to understand how that should work. And unfortunately, in the open source world, you say this a lot in your videos, a lot of people designing these desktop environments are developers, and there's not a lot of GUI designers. And there's definitely not a lot of GUI designers that understand blindness, or how to work around people with decreased mobility, or people who are deaf. And it kind of takes this. It takes us having a voice to be able to say, these are the things that really aren't working, and these things need to be fixed. And I hope that I'm able to do that.
Well, my understanding with accessibility on Linux is back in the early 2000s, a lot of companies like Sun, which is a name I've not mentioned in a long time, Sun Microsystems used to invest a lot of money into dealing with this problem, because that's back when like their Unix was still a fairly big thing. So if they improved something on the GNOME desktop, it was going to be used on their stuff as well. The problem is, as funding dried up for X11, a lot of that funding dried up for the accessibility tooling as well. And when the funding dries up for things like this, you're generally going to focus on... we're going to talk about like how important accessibility is, but you're generally going to focus on the larger user group. And
make it so the keyboard actually works before making it accessible.
Sure, yeah.
And I understand that. Even from a game dev perspective, that's how I program my games. Socially distant right now, you cannot play while blind. There's an accessibility settings menu, and you can turn all of the toggles on, but they don't do anything. But that's because the game is very early in development. I'm one person, and I know the game well, so I can work around the lack of accessibility features in it, and I don't have time to worry about them yet. So I completely get it. When there's a lack of manpower and a lack of money, it's not going to be the primary focus, because the focus should be on getting things working before making them accessible.
However,
because if they're accessible and not working, there's no point.
However, there is no excuse for the very basic things being missing. Like, if you don't have an invert color button, like, that's a problem.
If you don't have the ability to turn off a certain feature in the magnifier when you've spent the time to add a deconf entry for it and make code respond to it, but you haven't actually put the little toggle, which is probably, I don't know how GTK works, but in any game engine that would be 3 lines of code. Come on.
Yeah, pretty much. So we talked about the TTS on Windows, and you originally wrote the script that you have for use with eSpeak.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the voices that are available just out of the box on the Windows side versus Linux side?
Windows, like I said, they used to be great. Windows, if you're English speaking, your options are Microsoft David Desktop, or basically a female version of Microsoft David Desktop, and they have not updated them since in any meaningful or acceptable way since Windows 8.
Okay.
The only thing they've done is make them pronounce words differently. And incorrectly. So I don't like the Windows text-to-speech voices. They're very inaccurate, and it feels almost intentional. Like, how do you mess up pronouncing conversion when it's been working for 10 years? Whereas Linux, there isn't a whole lot of options with eSpeak by default, or Speech Dispatcher. Like, Speech Dispatcher is kind of like a systemd service wrapper for eSpeak and in these other speech engines. So it's kind of like the Wayland or the not Wayland, the X11 or Xorg or Pipewire of speech synthesis. It doesn't really do anything on its own. It just acts as like this friendly common API to work with the speech engines behind the scenes.
Right,
so it's a wrapper.
eSpeak's not the nicest command line from what I recall messing around with it.
Yeah. eSpeak is great for what I use it for, because the command line, you can either pass text in as an argument and it'll read it, or you can pipe text into it and it'll read that. I believe you can also take in a file as input and it'll try to read that. So it's really nice for like having it read output from files or stuff like that. And it can also do things like output the actual speech to a WAV file or to an MP3. So that's really nice. But I've had it kind of freak out a little bit sometimes when interacting within the terminal. But obviously you work around that. And then Speech Dispatcher has its own command line interface called SPD-say, and it basically works the same. You can pipe into it, you can pass arguments. It's really nice. And the only issue with eSpeak in particular is there's no variety in terms of voices. You have the default voice, and then just the default voice, but for different languages. Right. So there's the English voice, which does English voice things, and then there's the French voice that does French voice things, and that's, obviously you need that, because if you're a French person and you're blind, you probably want the voice speaking French to you. That makes sense. But at the same time, maybe you don't understand the default eSpeak voice. I don't know its name, because they don't name them like Microsoft does. obviously Microsoft gives names to them. Like there's Microsoft David Desktop, which sounds different from Microsoft Mark, who sounds different from Microsoft Mike and Sam and so on. They're different people basically. But eSpeak it's named based on the language.
EN1.
So maybe you don't understand. Yeah.
EN1, that's the name.
EN1 maybe. Something like that. Maybe you don't understand that voice. I'm lucky I do. But if you don't, I don't know where to get extra voices.
I don't know.
I don't know how to do it.
Do they even exist? Extra. Let's find out. Someone asked on Stack Exchange 9 years ago. It seems like some exist on random websites out there. Maybe.
Yeah, because I want to be downloading text-to-speech voices from random websites.
Yeah, there's one called Embrola. That's the only one I can even find.
I think that's just another speech engine, maybe? Because I've heard that name.
Embrola Project collection of diphone voices for speech synthesis. The Embrola voices are cost-free but are not open source. They're available at the Embrola website. eSpeak can be used as a front end for Embrola. There we go.
Oh, okay. So eSpeak is like, I don't know if it's a speech engine of its own or if it's wrapping Embrola. Maybe I'm actually using Embrola and I just don't know it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how this stack works. I know there's also.
Me neither, honestly.
I know there's also Festival. I don't know if you messed around with that.
Festival, it has the same default voice as eSpeak.
Oh.
But it's kind of more Xorgy in that it runs as a server and you have to like start it. And I don't want to do that. I'll start speech dispatcher so that like Electron can communicate with my text-to-speech voice. But eSpeak is just a program I run. It's not a server. I don't have to connect to eSpeak. I just give it a file or a string of text and it reads it. That's what I want.
And much like the Windows text-to-speak, it will run on a Pentium just fine.
Yep. And it will run on an ARM chip just fine. And it'll probably run on RISC-V.
So, you heavily make use of Unity. What is... Like, how does your workflow actually work in Unity? Like, what do you... Yeah, just explain, like, what you do.
So, we're socially distant. Fairly easy. A lot of what I do in Unity is through code. Like, I have my own kind of user interface system where I can declaratively put widgets on the screen through code. And a lot of the game scripting I actually do through Bash of all things, because I wrote a Bash interpreter for it. So I don't spend a whole lot of time in the actual Unity editor. And my extent in the Unity editor is just using the hierarchy and dragging things around in a tree. And I name things in such a way where they're small names and I can understand, because I put the UI together myself. I know where everything is. With Restitched, I generally try to avoid doing anything in scene view. Scene view is like your 3D view into the world where you place things and you drag them around and you scale them and all that stuff.
Yep.
But using scene view with a magnifier will make you puke. Because you're fighting with a perspective camera while zoomed into the screen, and your brain, at least my brain, does not handle it. I can't do it for more than 30 seconds. So with Restitched, whenever I need to do something in scene view, like I had a bug earlier that I had to track down with the way something was rendering with one of our dev tools. All I did was I hopped on a screen share on Discord and I had someone guide me around. Because everyone at Trixel knows that I'm blind. That is my thing there. I'm the blind lead programmer who has a vision for the game. So people are very helpful there with helping me get around the UI and stuff like that. And but most of what I do in Restitched, I try to stay outside of the Unity editor as much as possible. Obviously, sometimes I'm gonna have issues in the game where there's an error that maybe someone else on the team messed up a little bit with our API or didn't read the docs, which admittedly there isn't much. I'm trying to work on that. And you end up with like an assertion in the console and the game breaks. In that case, I have to copy the text out of the Unity console and into a Discord chat and read it through Discord. That is how I do it.
That
because
works.
Unity does not have screen reader support.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it does. I just don't know how to turn it on or what happens with it. I don't know.
Here's a
because
question.
Their user interface is rendered in engine, just like Unreal.
Here's a question for you. I don't know if this is something you've considered or not. I know there's a fairly easy way to do this on Linux. I don't know about the Windows side, but could you copy the text and have a script that would just read out whatever's in the clipboard? And just like hotkey it or something.
I have done that in GNOME with the Xorg selection clipboard because I don't know how Wayland does it, but with X11, whenever you highlight text on screen, there's a separate clipboard that text goes into.
Yeah, you have the main clip. And I think it's prime. I don't know what they're called. There's the copy clipboard, the highlight clipboard, and the it exists, but we don't actually use it clipboard.
Yeah. So with the highlight clipboard, you can use Xclip to get that out of Xorg and into a terminal or whatever you're doing. So what I did is I wrote a script that uses Xclip to read the selection clipboard and just pipe it to eSpeak. Like it's pretty much a one-liner, and then I wired up to a custom hotkey in GNOME, and it worked, but not in Unity. Because their selection is rendered in engine and it doesn't go through Xorg. So yeah.
Wait, so like
it worked.
If you actually like copied it to your like actual clipboard, like the copy clipboard, could you do it then?
Yes, I could do it if I copied to the clipboard. The problem with that is a lot of what I'm doing, I'm copying code between like different files and Discord. Sometimes I like to take a piece of code out of Restitch and pop it in our programming chat and go, who wrote this? And why? I'm very Linus Torvalds about it sometimes. Almost to a detriment. I've been yelled at by Halston a few times for it. I don't mean to be very like stern or rude about it, but like the way I type sometimes is very factual and to the point. And a lot of times I have like huge swaths of code in my clipboard that are sitting there in transit going to where I need to go. And sometimes I need to screen read something while that code is in transit. And obviously if I copy something that I want to screen read into the clipboard, whatever I was just holding on to is now gone.
Right.
And so it gets... I could use a clipboard manager to keep track of it, but the big thing with Restitched and security for me is I don't want what I'm working on to be saved outside of the context of our repository. Because I'm under NDA, I'm very particular about where the code goes on my computer. It does not go out of a trusted zone, and I don't want a clipboard manager storing that history. On Windows, for example, at one point, I actually had a few screenshots of the game synced to my personal OneDrive, and I'm like, why are you doing this, Microsoft? Why are you syncing private NDA stuff to my OneDrive where someone could reasonably hack into it? Like, I don't want that. So I try not to let anything leak too far out of where I want it to actually go. So I don't know. I'm very untrusting of a lot of things.
No, that's completely understandable. I don't know why Unity behaves that way with selections. That's odd.
It's because their user interface isn't rendered with a traditional toolkit. Like, obviously, the menu bar and the context menus are done to the native toolkit. I think it's GTK on Linux. But the rest of the editor UI is, it's their own custom thing. I think it's based off, like, IM GUI. And I can understand why they do it. It makes it a lot easier to render the scene view and stuff like that inside the UI in a little dockable window. I've tried to program game engine editors before and trying to get like an ATK widget to give me an OpenGL or Vulkan renderer inside it is just a complete nightmare, having the widget respond to the viewport size and whatnot. No, I can completely understand why Unity does their own UI.
Yeah.
But obviously it means that their selection system is going to be their selection system, and it's going to work in the context of their engine and their display system, and it's not going to go to the OS.
Right.
Because the selection clipboard is a very Xorg thing. It's not a thing on Windows, as far as I'm aware of, or Mac OS. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's a very Xorg thing.
I'm pretty sure you're right. I know it exists on Wayland. You can do it on Wayland. I don't know what. Actually, I don't know if you can do it on GNOME and KDE. I know you can do it on WL Roots. I haven't checked. They probably replicate the behavior, considering how many Linux applications expect it to be like that. But yeah, I'm not 100% certain there. Either way, Unity does their own thing anyway, so that wouldn't even deal with the problem.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's another way you could do it. That would work for like other things though. So if you're in a web browser or something, and for some reason the plugin died, you could have it work like that. But
honestly, it dies often. Like, it doesn't die. Like, my internet's pretty solid. I have gigabit, and it just never goes down unless someone like trips on an Ethernet cable because I'm not on Wi-Fi. But the extension itself uses Google's Cloud text-to-speech, at least on Linux. Okay. On Windows, now it uses Narrator, so it just goes through David Desktop. But it also tries to detect the language that the text is written in using Google Cloud. And if it just can't, there's a pre-recorded audio file of it saying, sorry, I can't read this paragraph.
Oh, so stupid. Just enunciate each letter. Like, that's a much better option.
Enunciate each letter or try to pronounce it as English. Because if you fail miserably at pronouncing, like, I don't know, X-Wayland, I can at least understand that you're trying to say X-Wayland.
Right.
But if you try to pronounce it in Japanese or Russian, I don't know what you're trying to say. Just, I don't know. Stop.
So, with all of the tooling that exists right now, is there anything that you would like... I know it's hard to imagine something that doesn't already exist, but is there something that... or some edge case, some use case you have that is just not being addressed at all, that you would like to see something be made for?
I've actually had a discussion in your Discord server with someone who's writing a Wayland compositor. I don't remember their name. And they're writing like a Wayland compositor or a display manager or something in PHP, so...
Oh, no, I know who you're talking about. It's the Psycho writing an Xorg server in X11 server in PHP.
Well, anyway, they had this idea of adding multiple mouse cursor support to their display manager.
Okay.
So you plug in a second mouse and you get a second mouse cursor. Kind of like the Wii remotes on the Wii, where if you have two remotes plugged in or whatever, you have two cursors that you move around and they're numbered and they represent different players. That genuinely would save so many accessibility issues for me when playing games specifically. Because a lot of games that I play are 3D games. I like my open worlds, I like driving around and stuff like that. I like my Grand Theft Auto. And I like my Cyberpunk. But because they are shooters and 3D games, they lock the mouse cursor to the center of the screen. Because the expectation is you don't have a cursor, you're aiming a gun or a camera. And the problem is, a lot of those game engines are custom and they're made for the game specifically, and the UI systems generally have custom cursors. I don't know about Grand Theft Auto 5 because I honestly play it on console, but Cyberpunk 2077, the Red Engine has a custom cursor. And they, even when you're navigating the menu, when you're doing a lot in Cyberpunk, because you're managing your inventory, you're crafting things, you're reading data shards that you stole off people, you're hacking. There's a lot of reading in that, and I need to be able to zoom in, but because their custom cursor is done in engine, they still lock the OS mouse cursor to the center of the screen.
Right.
Even in the UI. So when I try to zoom into Cyberpunk, my compositor thinks my mouse cursor is in the center of the screen, and that means that I cannot pan it at all. So being able to have some kind of system where instead of alt-tabbing out of the game, because maybe I want to zoom in while playing the game. Like maybe I want to look at the mini-map or the HUD elements to read some mission objective or something. Instead of alt-tabbing out of the game, which would lose keyboard focus and I wouldn't be able to play, I would want to be able to have like a button on my mouse that switches between one cursor that's like locked to the game and then a second cursor that I can interact with my desktop with. And maybe the two cursors don't render on screen at the same time, unless you want them to, but just having the ability to switch between those two cursor modes, where one of them is locked in the game engine, never leaves the game engine, and then the other is just interacting with your desktop, so I can pan around the zoom area and stuff like that. That would be lovely.
That does sound... Yeah, that is a really cool idea, isn't it? Huh. Actually, what is the experience like for you playing these games? Because Look, I'm a bad enough driver and I can see. And I'm bad enough at shooting and I can see. But what's it like for you?
Well, I'm about to send you a screenshot.
Okay.
I have to find it. It won't take me too long, but I have to scroll up in a chat. Of me playing Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Just found it. Just copying the image now.
That's a good choice of game, by the way. Very good.
I was playing it on PS5, and this is a screenshot of when I was running Windows. It's a screenshot of both my monitors. And what I have set up here is the right monitor, which is more vibrant and more colorful to me, is the game. That's an OBS capture of my PS5, and I'm playing the game through that, so I can zoom into the PS5 and stuff like that.
Okay.
The left monitor.
Makes sense. I was confused when you said you were using the PS5 because there'd be no way to zoom that. That makes sense.
Yeah, the left monitor is the minimap.
Okay.
A giant zoomed-in view of the minimap. So, what that lets me do is when I'm driving around, like I'm a hit driver no matter what, because I'm not going to see the other NPCs coming. I'm going to crash anyway, and I've kind of embraced that. So whenever I'm playing the game and driving around to a mission, a lot of games now, they have an GPS route that shows up on the map, and I can follow that. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, obviously too old, doesn't have that.
Right.
But I can at least see on the 2D map generally where I need to go. And I can look at my left monitor and just pay attention to that. Occasionally, I'll look to the right to make sure that I'm not running into someone's car or running people over and stuff like that and, killing my car. But most of the time, I'm looking at that left monitor, and that's just how I find my way around the city. And I've been doing that a lot with Cyberpunk, because it's a lot of driving around to missions.
Yeah.
And it's been really helpful. And Cyberpunk is really nice about it because it's one of the only games I know of that actually has pedestrian GPS. So when you're on foot, instead of it just drawing a straight line to wherever you need to go, it actually figures out the sidewalks and the staircases and everything that you need to walk through to get to where you're going. And I can follow that. So I can actually walk through Night City without ever looking at the game. Maybe I put a few dozen people around in the process and get people mad at me, but I still get to where I'm going.
I'm sure the missions that are, hey, get this vehicle to this location without it being destroyed, always need a couple of retries.
Yeah, Saints Row 4 is really bad for that. They have... Their vehicle physics in general are very bad.
Oh, yeah, no, they're wonky.
And I don't know if it's like the whole narrative of the game being in a simulation and things kind of being corrupted, but vehicle engine sounds are very important to pay attention to when you're blind. And Saints Row 4, half the time, doesn't play them. They don't sync up with what the car's doing. I will be braking at a full stop, and the engine will be revving. And that's something that Cyberpunk 2077 2.0 is really nice about, is they have DualSense support on PC now.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm driving around, not only can I hear the sound of maybe I've gone off-road by accident, I'll hear like the grinding and stuff of the dirt or whatever, but I'll feel it on the actual trigger. I will feel the resistance, and it makes it so much easier to moderate how fast I'm driving and keep myself going, staying on the road and in the right lane. It's amazing.
I had never thought of that as an accessibility feature.
Yeah.
Because I hate it. I find it really annoying. But that,
Well, I mean, when you think about it, when you don't have it's the same reason that I like my keyboard being Harry MX Blue. A lot of times when I'm typing, I don't have the visual feedback to tell me that I pressed a key. A lot of fonts are very wonky with how they display while zoomed in. And, with how far I zoom in, I maybe can fit like 3 or 4 words on the screen before I have to pan the screen around. So making typos is the thing I do often. And so whenever I'm on a linear switch or an older rubber dome switch, sometimes I will press the key, but I'm not confident it actually pressed in. Or maybe I'll press 2 keys at once, and I don't have that visual feedback. Whereas with a Harry Blue, not only do I actually feel the click of the switch activating, it's very tactile, but I can hear it. And on Windows, I have a HyperX Cloud Alpha wireless headset, and one of the features it has, a lot of the gaming headsets have this now, is microphone side tone, where it will take the microphone output and with absolutely no latency, play it through the actual headset. And that allows me to kind of hear my keyboard and everything, even when I'm listening to music. And that is really helpful for me. Can't do that on Windows or on Linux right now, unfortunately. I've tried it with Pipewire, but there's latency because it's being done in software.
Yeah. Maybe you could do some funky stuff with Jack? Maybe. Jack's a lot lower latency. So it's maybe possible. I don't know if it's gonna be low enough that it's viable though.
I know I was playing around with it earlier with doing the pulse audio loopback module, which works in Pipewire. But I had the latency set to 1 millisecond, but it was still enough to speak me. So I tried it for 5 minutes and then turned it off.
I just got a stupid overkill solution that'll do it. It's a hardware solution. So what you do is you get a mixer, an audio interface, that you plug a microphone into, and you get one that allows you to monitor the microphone, and then you just point a microphone at the keyboard.
Yeah. That would work.
It's just expensive.
Yeah, that's the problem. And speaking of keyboard, my keyboard tray is very old and broken and almost fell off my desk. That was almost a very loud noise. One moment.
So good, so
good.
Right,
we're good. I have a Keychron Q3 TKL, so it's like a solid block of aluminum. If that falls, you're gonna hear it.
Yeah. I don't use a keyboard tray. I'm not a fan of them personally.
I only do out of necessity. I don't have the room to put the keyboard on the desk.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's understandable. I had one when I was a lot younger and I didn't have the space, but now I just have everything on my desk and it's nicer. To be fair, my desk is covered in junk, but
so is mine. I have 17 different things on it right now. It's a mess.
So I think we've covered pretty much everything I want to cover. Maybe there's something I missed that I'll remember afterwards, but I think it was a good episode. I enjoyed this.
I did too.
So let people know, I guess, where they can find the games, where they can send people places.
Okay, I'm gonna plug my Patreon because that's where the socially distant devlogs go every month.
Is that linked on the Social Distant website?
It's my personal Patreon. I would have to update the actual website. I will probably do that after the stream.
Wait,
or
is
after the podcast, sorry. But patreon.com/acidiclight.
It actually is linked under the devlog section.
Oh, okay. So I did actually do it. Okay. It's WordPress. It's kind of annoying to use, so I kind of forget.
Understandable.
And I actually have a devlog that's just coming out of early access, I think tomorrow night.
Okay.
For January 2024, and that kind of shows a giant user interface overhaul that I've done, and a lot of the work that I've done with the Bash interpreter and making game scripts actually a thing that I can do, so I can do narrative scripting now. It's a huge update, and I'm really excited about that. But that's been in early access, so I have one patron right now.
Well, when you
they are the only ones who can see it.
When you said you implemented a terminal in the game, I didn't think you actually like. I
ported the suckless terminal to Unity. That's what I did.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah. I actually patched in some useful stuff that I needed for the game. Like, obviously, I need scrollback because people expect scrollback to be there. I need text selection because people expect text selection to be there. You need copy-paste.
Uh-huh.
Yes, do. So I patched that stuff in. And then I understand enough C from learning it in college that I was able to completely reverse engineer how the suckless terminal works and how all the X11 APIs work, and I just ported them to Unity. And it works great. There were a few performance issues at the start of it, but I've ironed them out. I get like a consistent 250 FPS even when I'm running commands, which before commands would like completely drop to single digits because of how C# memory management works and text manipulation. But it's all been fixed.
That's so stupid. I love it. That's awesome.
I hope the suckless guys don't mind, by the way. I forgot to check the license.
Yeah, maybe you should do that.
Yeah, maybe. But I do plan, right now it's proprietary because it's required to be because of some assets that I have in the Unity project that I have them licensed, but I'm not allowed to redistribute them as raw audio files. But I do plan on splitting the code of the terminal out into its own package that you can just slot into Unity and then have a terminal emulator that supports full VT100 and all the ANSI codes you could possibly need.
Oh my god. That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. Okay, so we have the Patreon. Anything else you want to mention?
Obviously give Trixel Creative some love. I'm the lead programmer there. I've been lead programmer for almost 2 years. Support them on Patreon because honestly, the money doesn't go to me; it goes to them. But that allows Trixel to get Unity assets and stuff like that that make the game easier for us to make. So if you like Restitched, go and support Trixel Plus because just like my personal Patreon, you get devlogs a week early for Restitched. It's called Restitched Recapped. And there's also dev diaries and stuff like that. I think there's one that kind of goes over that I wrote a year ago that like kind of goes over my blindness and how I do Restitched with it. So that might be an interesting read. And then, I'm gonna stop plugging Patreons now because
you go ahead. Plug whatever you want to plug.
My Discord server, the Acidic Lighthouse. It's linked on my personal website. If you want to get in touch with me, whether it be about KDE, the bug, or GNOME bugs, or Linux, or you want to talk about accessibility, or you want to keep up with Socially Distant, I'll give you a hint. Sometimes I violate my own Patreon and leak stuff from it in the Discord server, because I'm nice. Head over there, because that is the most accessible spot for me to hang out. I'm always on Discord. So... Then there's I'm inclined to share my YouTube channel because that's where the KDE bug drama started. But I don't make videos often. It's very difficult for me. I can't do video editing. At least not without a video editor that I learned years ago that no longer exists. So, and obviously I can't do teleprompters and stuff like that, so I don't do scripted content. A lot of my videos are just either hit posts, honestly, like I made a Oh Canada jump scare a while ago, and then I made a PS3 startup sound, but it's the THX Deep Note, and that got like 200,000 views. Don't know why, but a lot of my other stuff is just me trying to program something or trying to do something on my computer and showing how to do it. And so, Acidic Light on YouTube. I don't make videos often, but sometimes I do, and you might enjoy them, or might not. Who knows?
Sure. Is that all you want to mention?
The last thing I want to mention is obviously Mastodon.
Okay.
Acidic Light on Mastodon, because I've been active on there a lot more. Obviously I follow you, I follow Vaxry, I follow even the GNOME dev that was kind of giving you crap earlier because I managed to get him to stop giving you crap and then start giving me crap and then stop giving me crap. And we were able to get to a civil discussion there. And Mastodon is also another really accessible place for me. I really like it. I used to be on Twitter, but Twitter became not Twitter, and now they like basically treat you like a bot until you're not, and I don't like it.
Except they
so
don't treat
Mastodon
the bots
is a
like
nice
bots,
place.
so that's the problem.
Yeah.
I've seen this
I
trend.
stopped.
Sorry.
I stopped using Twitter when you could no longer post links to public posts and have them embed because you just needed to be logged into Twitter, and that's not social media. Social media is to be able to have a voice and share it with the world, and not everyone's gonna have an account. So like, you need public posts, and Mastodon is very nice about that. Obviously, they're very decentralized. I'm on Mastodon.social. I don't think they'll ever go rogue or anything like Twitter did. But if they do, you know what? I have the power to start my own instance and move there, or move to another instance, and I like that.
One trend I saw recently on Twitter is there's a lot of AI content now, and sometimes you'll see as the AI language model, I'm not able to respond to this question.
In a reply on a tweet?
Yes.
I'm glad I left Twitter.
And then you have bots under that replying to that as if it's an actual post. It's a mess of a platform. I love it. I enjoy watching the dumpster fire. So if that's all you want to mention, then I'll do my outro.
All right. Yeah.
Awesome. So if you like this stuff and you want to see something actually more planned out, check out my main channel, that is Brody Robertson. I do Linux videos there 6-ish days a week. I have my gaming channel. Over there, I am probably still playing through Neptunia and the world end, Near the World Ends With You. I don't know if I'm done with that. If I am, I'll be playing something else. Check it out. There'll be something fun there. If you're listening to the audio version of this, you can find the video version on YouTube at Tech Over Tea. If you want to find the audio version, there is an RSS feed. It's going to be on every podcast platform. Search Tech Over Tea, and you'll probably find it. So, how do you want to end it? Give me your outro. Say something.
I can't use my regular outro. And you know what? I'll be honest. I'm gonna steal the Private Hen's outro. The name is the Ritchie Hen.
Sure. You know what? That works. That works. See you guys later.